throne.
Well done, Mayfair.
Right, finally, last but by no means least, Peetle, the Weeple, Baker Faff the second. Central to Team Faff, Pete even has Faff in his name. Pete won't acknowledge how faffy he can be, but everyone knows that and lets it go. Pete has been a good friend to me for a while now. We encourage each other and keep each other in check. Our dialogue, mostly me, is always on point and flows back and forth like a vast, nuanced, babbling river of wisdom. And I'm going to hand over to Pete now so he can merrily spray the room with said wisdom.
Just you, Jamie.
Hello, my name is Pete Baker. And I would like to start by proposing a toast to President Zelensky of Ukraine and the Ukrainians and the Russians, who are not our enemies.
Yes.
Absolutely.
I have been called upon to deliver a speech on this, the occasion of Mark Snare's 49th birthday.
Oh, yeah.
Most of you will have been on the WhatsApp group and subjected to Mark's WhatsApp diarrhea. He just can't help himself. He always has something he needs to share. You may have been on WhatsApp seen that I will be using this speech mainly to talk about myself. Several people assumed this was a joke. No. What follows is mainly about me. After all, those of you who already know Pete Baker will want to know more.
Obviously.
And those of you who don't know Pete Baker will be eager to get to know me. But before that, I want to say how agreeable it is to be here with so many intriguing and gorgeous people. There are precious few times in life when you can all come together and listen to Pete Baker talk about himself. It's wonderful that this is happening because it nearly didn't happen. Yes, we all witnessed Mark's WhatsApp collywobble. It happened on an app where acting like 11 is preserved for eternity, so the collywobble can be dated precisely to Thursday the 10th of February. I am referring, of course, to Mark's, and I quote, flash of genius, where he decided it would be a great idea for us to sit in the dirt in Victoria Park at the beginning of March, getting really cold for the afternoon. Sounds great! Thinks absolutely no one ever. Luckily, while we pondered what planet Mark was living on, a guardian angel stepped in the form of Joanne Taylor-Hall. Joanne stepped into the collywobble breach on the morning of Saturday the 12th of February, and I thought it was worth reviewing her comments here. So I offer you Joanne's missive, along with my translation of what she was actually saying. Joanne wrote, Mark, Darren started full-time on his business in that week of March 2018, and it snowed the whole week. Translation, have you lost your mind? Next, Joanne wrote, so my reservation is the air temperature. Translation, you amateur. Then Joanne wrote, I think it is going to be not quite warm enough for a day's outdoor picnicking. May I encourage you to find an indoor venue? Translation, This is the worst organised party I've seen since the mid-1990s. Finally, Joanne wrote, shift the gig to a local eatery. Park sounds ace. Until you think about the potential weather. Let's do this indoors. Translation, sorted, you pillock. I think we can all thank Joanne for that. Joanne.
And together we gave Pete Baker something to base his
I
speech
know.
on. It didn't work.
Although Vicky Parker would have been
Now,
convenient.
before I get onto myself, I would like to say a few words about some of the guests. Mark was obviously very complimentary, and I thought it might be a good time for a bit of light denunciation. While I'm going to say while I'm holding the microphone, but there is no microphone while I'm speaking. And a bit of spice. So I don't think it works. I try it.
What were you Pete is interfering with the podcast.
Is it interfering? Is it interfering? Right, it's not working, is it?
Oh my God.
Turn it off. So after
Pete, just man up.
a bit of light denunciation. So after putting Mark in his place last month, Joanne came after me. Can you imagine? She began instructing me what I was to put in this speech. Not asking, requesting, or suggesting, instructing me. Telling me. Joanne wrote, Pete, in your speech, tell everyone that Mark is in our fold because I met him through work and sponsored his entry into the London gang. Then she wrote, you have, that's in capitals, you have to mention this. I have to. Have I? Anyway, when you say meeting him through work, aren't you referring to that story when he hit on you?
No.
When he first day at work and he hit on you?
No.
Have I got that right? No? Am I getting my stories mixed up? Who was it? Who was it that hit on you in the car? Oh, that was me! That was me!
That guy.
Sorry.
Yeah, it was a Mark.
Dog style,
Yeah.
wasn't it? Chasing you around
Yes, that's
chasing you
right.
around the table. Sorry, that was me.
Yeah.
You know the feeling, Norma. You know the feeling.
Well done, Pete.
Some other esteemed guests. I also have to talk about Jane Mostyn. I'm a big fan of this lady. International investment banking superstar. She's very modest, obviously. Jane, I have one question for you. Serious question. How was the lobster? How was the lobster? I thought that was something on the WhatsApp group. Never mind. Let's move straight on to Tony, shall we? There he is. Tony, my old compadre. Tony, mad bastard Bowers, the original #1 monster of rock. So cuddly on the outside. Phew. Mental. Pete Raystrick, the godfather of hardcore, chess master. If the Russians get this far west, Pete already has all the gear. He's wearing it now, full camo. All you need is an M16, Pete, and I expect that you already have the night vision goggles. Vladimir is literally quaking. And then we have the great Petra Bizzle. I first met Petra in 2000. Joe Horn, again, told me we were going clubbing to Slinky in Southampton. My instructions were to go to Borough Tube Station in South London, where I would be picked up by a Swedish girl. Sounds familiar. I was 27 and naive, and it sounded like a good plan to me. Little did I know. In the end, it was 3 Swedish girls and me in a car bombing down the M25. Memorable. But it was only an hour later when they introduced me to Paul, that things really flew off the handle. Golly, it got zany. My abiding memory of that evening was being locked in the cubicles at Slinky Nightclub, while actual three-headed demons came out of the wall at me. Until then, I didn't know that sort of stuff actually happened. Petra and her Swedish mates found me young and fresh-faced, and they left me a pathetic, dribbling heap on the floor. It wasn't dignified, but it was character building. Thank you for making a man out of me, Petra. And in force today, we have, of course, the Snare Clan. The famously bonkers Snare Clan. More nuts than the fruitcake rack at Tesco. Loopier than a jumbo-sized pack of hula hoops. Balmier than a warm evening in late July. Mad as a box of frogs. This is the box, and I'm speaking of frogs. Anyway, this is my preamble. Now I'll move on to my speech. The theme of which will be these middle years and making sense of them. I've just turned 48. Mark is now 49. Now, I don't approve of the term middle-aged when referring to myself. I prefer to think of this as late youth. But for the purposes of this speech, I will concede the descriptive middle years, which certainly includes one's late 40s. My first hook is a project I undertook a few years ago, between 2016 and 2018. In 2016, my final parent, my beloved father, Reginald Baker, died. At that point, I came into possession of a large chest of family photos. The photos were from several strands of my extended family, all the way back to the last decades of the 19th century. The earliest photo I definitively dated was from the 1870s. I resolved that I would scan these photos and upload them into the cloud, both to preserve them and so they could act as a shared resource for my extended family. It turned out there were 2,100 photos in that chest, and each one had to be scanned and cropped. Then I had to work out who was in it, not always obvious, put it in the right online album and label it. So it was a lot of work, but enlightening in several ways. First, it made me really look at these ancestors of mine. I was forever zooming in on screen, taking a proper close-up look at them, and at different points in their life cycle. For example, my great-grandmother, Elizabeth Marsh, who lived between 1857 and 1938. I have pictures of her from when she was 21 in 1878, at the births of her children in 1886, 1891 and 1898, and some gorgeous photos of her in her middle years. And finally, a photo of her as an old woman in 1937, the year before she died. And in that photo, she is holding a baby, and that baby is my mother. The photos from the ancestor chest show the arc of great-grandmother Elizabeth's life. It also contained far more granular photographic life arcs of her children, her grandchildren, and her great-grandchildren, who were my grandparents, parents, cousins, aunts, and uncles. I could see these people go from baby to lad, to Jack the lad, to father, through middle age, and finally to greybeard. And because I knew quite a lot about the life stories of quite a lot of these people, I could reflect on what about their lives went well, and not so well. And from that, I have the first conclusion I want to share today. Life is a marathon, not a sprint. Several people depicted in those photo arcs went through stages of great achievement in their lives, golden periods. but for one reason or another couldn't keep it up. Perhaps due to ill health, poor mental health, losing their nerve, or being unable to overcome some character flaw. Later parts of their lives became defined in reference to earlier periods of success which they could not recapture. I believe the most satisfying lives go through phases. Each phase has its own character and rewards. The trick is to stay useful. When I was in my 20s, I threw the best parties. No longer. But now, I'm a great housekeeper. I have masses of energy for raising small children, and I'm much more of an asset to the economy. Rishi Sunak is pleased with me.
Don't forget how modest you are.
When I'm 68, my mind will likely be less agile. But I've learned of late that grandparent figures can be invaluable. In 40 years, 2062, the future, if I live that long, I'll be 88. I have also learned that 88-year-olds can be very useful by providing stability, wisdom, and context to those around them. Life is a marathon, not a sprint. Treat it like a marathon. Stay relevant, stay useful, don't lose your nerve. Don't be defined by some earlier phase of life. There is more to give, so give. The second thing I want to share about that ancestor chest of old family photos is a particular photo I found. The photo was of my late father. In it, he had climbed into the branches of a pear tree. I knew the tree immediately. It is a large, gnarled and ancient pear tree in the corner of the garden of our family home. Then I flipped the photo over and it was dated. Now, very few photos in that chest were dated, perhaps 1 in 100. And it was always useful to get a precise date. And that photo of my father in the pear tree was dated to the 12th of August 1972, 6 days before the birth of my older sister Ruth. I immediately scanned the photo and pinged it to Ruth on an email with this news. She wrote back a few hours later with these words. I remember that photo, didn't know the date. Strange to think this is a man who was just about to become a father and who had another 44 years of life ahead of him and a whole new career to come. Pretty inspiring to think about it, really. Dad was 46 when that photo was taken, almost exactly halfway through his life. 18 months younger than I am now. And yet, everything me and my sister experienced with our father and about our father followed that moment in the pear tree. All the things we shared, whole phases of life, whole chapters, it all lay before him. And that is where I am, where Mark is now, and where many of you are. At 48, I feel like I've done a lot of living. I've been fortunate, lived a blessed life. And yet, like my dad in 1972, I'm only halfway. I have so much more to live, so let's bloody live. Which brings me to my final thought. I recently read a piece that moved me greatly. It was written by someone who worked in hospices, in palliative care, comforting those who were close to death. This person made an observation about regret, about the things that people regret when they get to the end of their lives. And this person's experience was that for those right at the end of their lives, who know that they are at the end, the thing that they regretted most was not that they were not true to themselves, or that they had worked too hard, or hadn't expressed their feelings better. No, the thing they regretted most was not,
Tension.
The thing they regretted most was not appreciating and being grateful for the miracle and miraculousness of simply being alive. Because it is a miracle. First, the fact that reality is here at all. The central mystery of the universe, that it exists. That there is something rather than nothing. And then, given that one enjoys the immeasurable fortune to actually be born. Rather than being one of the trillions of humans, those uncountable ghosts who outnumber the sand grains of Arabia, who were never born. We get to experience this transcendental gift of life. Feeling, breathing, loving. In this brief, flickering existence between two infinities, before we are returned to the raw stuff of creation. I'll finish with Homer. The gods envy us. They envy us. They envy us because we're mortal. Homer. The gods envy us. They envy us because we're mortal. Because any moment may be our last. Everything is more beautiful because we're doomed. You will never be lovelier than you are now. We will never be here again. But for now, we get to enjoy the miracle of being alive.